Hello everyone and welcome back to Natha and Dia's Guide to Everything. Today I've got a video about the reasons you should play Candela Obscura, the new tabletop RPG, the horror tabletop RPG from Darrington Press. The minds behind Darrington Press, of course, being Critical Role. Candela Obscura is their first foray into designing their own systems, essentially for more play on their channel. They're looking to diversify their content, just like me in this day and age. They have Candela Obscura Daggerheart, I think, coming, which is a bit more D&D focused, I think. And their new game, Queen by Midnight, I think it's called. I have only tried Candela Obscura. I only have context for Candela Obscura. Without further ado, I think let's jump into it. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this. Let's talk about Candela Obscura and why I think you should give it a go. Very briefly first, let's just talk about the setting of the game. Candela Obscura is a horror tabletop role-playing game about occult investigators who hunt down dangerous supernatural forces, making incursions into a world very much like your own. Candela Obscura is also the name of the paranormal secret society charged with protecting the sprawling turn-of-the-century city of Newfair, a place built atop the ruins of an ancient fallen civilization teeming with the remnants of powerful magic. I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail here. You can find out more about Candela Obscura in the Quick Start Guide. I'll link it in the description down below. Go and check it out. Give it a download. Give it a read. I would highly recommend it. I just went through that for a little bit of context so you know kind of what I'm talking about here. So first up from my notes here, honestly, it's just good. I've played 2 games with my friends that I regularly play D&D with, and we all absolutely loved it, to be honest with you. I think because a lot of the players I've played with so far have only played D, and that's their only exposure, they're still fairly new to the tabletop industry, they're very open to trying these things and trying to learn a new system. I sent them the tutorial, the quick start guide that Darrington Press, Critical Role, have it loaded to YouTube. It's like a 7-minute video. They know the rules, jobs are good, and we made some characters just before a session, took about half an hour, and we just started playing. I had a little idea in my mind for a mission, so I didn't use the one in the quick start guide. But it's really, really straightforward. I think probably a lot of the people that are going to come and watch this video will be, one, fans of D&D and also fans of Critical Role. And I think that's really, really important. I think Critical Role fans in general, including myself, this is how I found D&D, to be honest. A lot of Critical Role fans will kind of be probably pigeonholed themselves kind of into basically only playing D&D because that's what they know, that's what they love, and they're a bit intimidated to try other things, and I can totally understand that. But I think this, honestly, an experience with this will be really, really illuminating for you, and I actually think anyone can enjoy it. But I think for Critical Role fans specifically, this is going to open their eyes to the whole wide world that is out there of amazing tabletops that you can get involved in. So for me, as soon as I saw the trailer for it and such, all I could think was, they've copied Call of Cthulhu. Now, yes, they have, but they've also designed their own Illuminated Worlds system. The comparison to Call of Cthulhu kind of stops at the setting, to be honest. They are very, very different games. And I think actually Candela Obscura, for someone that's not a hardcore tabletop RPG fan, is probably much, much easier to pick up. For example, let's just look at the character sheets. I'll pop them up on screen now. What you can see is that the Call of Cthulhu one has a lot going on. There's a lot of numbers. It's much more difficult to kind of decipher what might be going on. I think everything just kind of jumps out at you and you can clearly see what's meant to go in there. Relationships, you know what should go in there. Speciality, obviously, not all of them are available right now. The one I'm showing you would just be an example character sheet, again, from the Quick Start Guide, which me and my friends used without issue. While the rules for Call of Cthulhu, I know, I've played the game once or twice, are fairly straightforward. You roll below a percentage, you basically succeed, right? That's fine. Whereas with Candela Obscura, you have this Quick Start Guide, this first exposure. It's obviously very well produced on the Critical Role channel. You can watch them play and start to understand the game that way. That's another reason why I got into D&D so much, is basically I learned to play through watching them. And obviously they play a very different kind of game to most, but still it has value. I will say next, kudos to the people who put the Quick Start Guide together for Candela Obscura. It has just enough to get you where you need to be, get you to basically playing. It's not super detailed, but it tells you what you need to know. I think any DM, GM, lore keeper, whatever you might want to call it, worth their salt should be able to give that a quick read and be able to run a game without issue. I'm quite experienced in that, so I picked it up no problem. So very briefly on the Illuminated World system, which seems great and really, really versatile, which is what I like about it. Whenever you want to do something in game, you roll a d6 or multiple d6s, and there is more nuance to this, but I'll just do the basics. On a 1 to 3, you fail. On a 4 to 5, you succeed, but it comes at a cost. And on a 6, you get what you want and a little bit more. If you roll double 6s, it's like a critical success, which is good fun too. Another thing I love is the game system itself. This Illuminated Worlds system, the way they've designed it really encourages players to come out of their shell roleplay-wise, I think, and really embody their characters, which I'm a huge fan of. I have a party of beginners, essentially. They've only been playing for, a year or so, I guess almost 2 years now, actually, but only one campaign as we've got through, right? So they're relatively new to the world. And I think having these little prompts on screen that's called Illumination Keys, these little missions, these little things your character can do to improve themselves. And I just think it gives them ideas and what they might want their character to be like. I think that's really, really cool. Let's take the Slink Criminal, for example, the example they give you in the Quick Start pre-gen characters. You can kind of guess what a slink criminal, right? Be slink being the role, by the way, speciality being a criminal. So think like class, subclass. Illumination keys. You have do something illegal, make a deal, or stand up to authority. And this just gives you an idea of some of the things you might want to accomplish, I guess, in the game. And that's really, really fun. We can check out another one here, Muscle Explorer. Their illumination keys are study an artifact, discuss history, or run into danger. And that creates some really cool roleplay moments. And actually, in the game that we played, I essentially spinned a version of the movie The Descent, if you've seen it, with these kind of underground goblins, essentially, that stalk caves. I just had the idea. I thought it might make for a good session. In the second game, we did have, in fact, my friend Nick, who was playing a Muscle Explorer, smuggler, Indiana Jones type character. That's what comes to mind. He managed to get the run into danger thing by being the first one to volunteer to basically dive down into the caves head first. It just made for some awesome roleplay moments. And at the end of it, I should talk about that. When characters roleplay well and they fulfill those illumination keys, it does actually benefit them. Across the course of an assignment, as long as all the players essentially fulfill one illumination key, they get some bonuses. So when it comes to the end of an assignment, the GM, the lawkeeper, whatever you want to call it, let's call him the GM for now, will ask some illumination questions and see if, and discuss basically, whether the characters ticked off their keys. So questions like, for example, coming from the circle sheet, did you contain or destroy a source of bleed? Bleed is like the effect that is left behind by paranormal entities, essentially by phenomenon, as they're called. Did you provide comfort or support for those affected? Didn't you bring back something of importance for Candela Obscura to study? So that's kind of the groups, the circles, if you call it. So that's what the group of players would be called. They are part of a circle. That's what they're aiming towards as a group. But then each character, as I mentioned, has these illumination keys. And if everyone ticks off at least one, you get a bit of progress on the illumination circle advancement. And once you get so far around that, essentially, your circle levels up and you can pick a circle ability. And the feedback I got from my players is that they absolutely loved this feature, essentially. And that is the two kind of points I have written down here, kind of melded into one. Illumination keys are great. And the reason they're great is the circle advancement sheet is fantastic. It really gives the group something to aim towards. And this, the Candela Obscura is not aimed to be a year-long campaign. I don't think. Maybe you could stick with the same characters for a year, but I don't think so. It's made for like short stories, arc-driven gameplay is how they describe it. And honestly, I'm a huge, huge fan of that. You don't have to have a big commitment into an 18-month-long, 2-year campaign. You can just dip in and out, embody these fun characters, and you're done. I do think, too, I touched on it earlier, the Illuminated World system. In general, I think the whole game is designed very, very well. It's not groundbreaking or anything, but it is really good, and it's super open-ended. So this is the thing. I managed to craft a homebrew for this game in about 45 minutes. Literally, I took that concept I have, which was, I think I'd recently watched the horror movie The Descent, and I was like, that would be perfect. That seems really, really fun. These underground goblins from that old city that New Fair is built on makes sense. Why not? I really think this system, the Illuminated World system, this D6 system, could be applied to almost any setting. Me and my friends years and years and years ago had this idea of making Rainbow Six Siege, so like a military shooter, into an RPG game and trying to play it that way. I was like, how would we ever do that? I started writing things in Excel and it went nowhere. But with something like this, you could just change the name of the skills, and you're in. You could make this thing. It's just fantastic. Oh, and that's another thing that I almost forgot about. On the character sheet, the gear section might be my favorite part of it. The gear section works in a really, really fun way. Essentially, you don't have to declare what things you have before you go. There can be some mainstays, essentially. You pick a couple of things when you design your character, and maybe anything you pick up during assignments, obviously that carries over. But the gear for an assignment, you can essentially choose 3 on the fly. So if you go into a room and you happen to need a magnifying glass, you can say, I bought one with me. But you can do this 3 times, essentially. So it's really, really diverse in how you can approach a situation, really diverse in how each character can excel at certain things. And I just love that gear system. Just being able to choose what you want on the fly. It saves this having to go role play, go to a shop, buy a thing, you don't need to do any of that. You just go, yeah, I bought it. So back on task, essentially. I think it could be expanded to any other setting really, really easily. And I might try at that. And I think Homebrew is going to be rife for this. You could, if you like, read through a Call of Cthulhu adventure and just adapt it straight for this. There is loads of like high fantasy or sci-fi horror that could work really well with the Illuminated World system. I think they're kind of banking on that. It's very, very easy to adapt to other settings. This brings us down to the downsides though too. I think it is easy to adapt because it is quite simple. I think that's why they've kind of detailed it as short arc-driven campaigns as opposed to a long-term thing. I noticed straight away that I don't think you'd want to play loads of this. I think in spurts, essentially, would be really, really good. But it is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. So I can see that is kind of a positive and a negative. It's kind of limited in how crunchy it can get. I quite like the crunch of D&D, how many options you have. But I think, again, with Homebrew and things like that, that could be rectified quite easily for this type of game. I would say another thing coming from D&D to this is kind of the power trip that players might have if they're not used to it, if they've only played D&D, and that's kind of the goggles I'm using when looking at this game. Combat isn't the focus, and that definitely is not for everyone. You don't have a ton of hit points. You can't take a bite from a dragon and live. If you get hit in this game, it can be quite unforgiving. You're just a guy or a girl or whatever you want to be in this world where you might be going up against really supernatural paranormal entities, right? But again, this isn't necessarily a downside. This is just a warning for what players might want to expect. So definitely, if you decide to run this, please just preface it by letting your players know this is the kind of game it is. It's a bit slower. It's going to require a little more role play. And I think this game almost does require a little bit of role play, at least. And so that point kind of ties into my next point. I mentioned that it's lethal and it's not a power trip, but I don't think it's quite lethal enough. And I think, honestly, if I play this game again, you get basically like 12 lives before you die. And that system is amazing. So here's another upside before we do the downside. When you essentially take damage, you would take a body, brain, or a bleed. And so if you take a body, that's physical damage. You take brain, that's kind of mental stress that can affect your character, and your DM will tell you when this happens, essentially. There's no save or anything. And bleed is exposure to phenomena, exposure to paranormal entities, right, that can affect your character. You have to get 3 to max it out and then 1 more to get a scar. You fall unconscious in the scene and you wake up with a scar, which alters your character. You can reassign how your character plays. Let's say you take 4 bodies, you lose an arm. You're going to have to take some points away from your move skill or your strength skill, or whatever it might be, and put it into something else, because you're no longer going to be able to move as well if you lose a leg or an arm or something like that, right? As I mentioned, the downside of that is I don't think it's lethal enough. You have 12 lives. That's a lot. You could just punish the players more for making stupid decisions, right? You could just say you gain a body, a brain, a bleed more often, and they'll go down. But I think the way it looks on the character sheet, I think if you get 3, you should then get a scar, I think, just to make it a little bit more lethal. And so I guess that's not really a downside. It's just a game function. Well, there you go. So I think that's it. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover in this video. Overall, obviously, very, very positive. I am excited for this game. I'll definitely be picking up the full rulebook when it comes out and trying to explore it a little bit more. I'm excited for all the other character options. And that is another thing before I sign off. The character options, they're really open-ended, and I think you could design your own really, really easily. And I think people will do that. Maybe I'll take a stab at that. Why not? Why not? I'll take a stab at making my own role. Speciality, the terminology is something that's tough. Role and speciality is correct. Class and subclass. Maybe I'll have a look at making my own speciality or something like that with some cool features. I hope that gave you all the information you need to maybe dive into some Candela Obscura. Hope that illuminated you to the possibilities of what you might be able to do with this game. If you've always wanted to try Call of Cthulhu, try this first. Maybe if you want more crunch, go back to Call of Cthulhu. There's a lot more crunch there, for sure. I'm going to stop rambling now. I could just talk about this stuff all day. I really, really enjoy it. And the potential of this game, I think it could really go somewhere. I think it's going to be a hit. And I think the views on YouTube for the series have shown it can definitely be a hit, for sure. So if you enjoyed this one, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate all the support. Share it with your friends. Maybe this can convince them. I think so. I hope so. Hello to all the new subscribers on the channel. Thank you so much for watching and supporting us recently. We've had some really great growth. What I would say is that for those of you out there that aren't subscribed, 93% of you that are watching my videos are not subscribed. Please do me a huge favor. I want to make this my full-time job. Please subscribe and we can all win together. I promise to put out the best content possible, and we are kind of fan-driven. I take a lot of suggestions. So if you have an idea for some content or anything you want me to cover, any tutorials, how-tos, anything like that for any tabletop RPG, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Nathan Deer's Guide to Everything, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.